You're listening to The Morning Show with Kathryn Thomas on Dublin's Q102. Now, part 2 of the Skinny Jab Revolution documentary series I worked on, which explores the whole world of GLP-1 weight loss medications. It is on tonight, part 2. It is at 9:35 on RTE1. And as well as the inequality of access that's emerging globally, another area we look at on tonight's programme is the whole area of ultra-processed food and the role it plays in shaping our environment. Professor Norah Campbell is a critical marketeer lecturer in Trinity College, and she says the lengths and tactics food companies go to create addictive foods are enormous, and she believes it's not a skinny jab revolution we need, but an entire food system revolution. Norah, good morning.
Good morning.
It is great to see you. So, I mean, listen, we hear a lot about ultra-processed food, and it's just become the sort of the talking point now, isn't it? But I suppose let's kind of go back and strip it back, because there's processed food and ultra-processed food. So first of all, just tell us what exactly is ultra-processed food.
Okay, Kathryn. So I suppose your listeners, if they remember the number 4, that's all they need to leave here with, because there's actually 4 categories of food. The first is known as minimally processed or unprocessed. So your fruit and veg, your kind of beans, pasta, that kind of thing. The next category is what's known as culinary ingredients. So that's anything that's in your kitchen that you use to put on food. Olive oil or butter or salt or sugar, that kind of thing. Stuff that's in your kitchen to flavour food. The next category is processed food. So processed food are all of those foods that we put in an industry or in a factory, we put salt, sugar, fat into. And we make things like bread, cheese, that kind of thing. And then the fourth category is a category that's been around since the 1970s but has skyrocketed since the 2000s, and that's known as ultra-processed food. So the difference between unprocessed and ultra-processed is basically 2 things. I would say 2 things. The first is the type of additives and ingredients are known as cosmetic. So they're not put in to extend shelf life or to make things kind of slightly tastier. They are there to make things hyper palatable. So extremely, extremely tasty. So I looked at a website for a food ingredients company last week based in Ireland, and they have 40 different types of cheese flavouring that you can put in any product if you're a product manufacturer. So it's the type of kind of additives that are going in are cosmetic, designed to make you eat and eat again. And then really importantly, the processes. So the processes in processed food used to be things like hydrogenation, pasteurization, you know, all that stuff you learn in school about milk. Well, the type of processes that are being used for hyper or ultra processed food are things like hydrolysis, nanotechnological, like heating and chemical molecular operations at the level of the food itself. So extreme processing treatments and extreme flavouring treatments.
And I think that's kind of interesting, because a lot of people would, you know, even for me, it would be like, oh, you do ultra-processed food because it gives extended shelf life.
Yes.
You don't actually think about the addictive nature behind it.
Yes.
And that is, I think, the point that you're trying to make.
Yes. And it's not just the point that I'm trying to make. I think people since 2011, people far greater than me and who are working in nutrition epidemiology, molecular virology, cell metabolism, have been looking at this from a really scientific point of view. And what they are seeing since 2011, there's piles of research since then, is do these foods have the same type of quality as other addictive substances like alcohol and nicotine? So there's 2 people in the University of Michigan doing a lot of research on this at the moment. Is this type of food addictive? Does it result in the type of compulsive behaviours that you would see in alcohol addiction or nicotine addiction, sort of compulsively craving the food or repeatedly giving up the food only to go back on it? So there's very high kind of similarities between that type of addiction and ultra-processed food addiction being done right this moment.
And do we know how much of our diet in Ireland is now made up of ultra-processed food?
We don't know exactly, but other research since kind of about 10 years ago have been tracking other national food diets, particularly in Canada and the United States. So in Canada, it's gone from, since about 2000, their food proportion was about 20%, and now it's at 50%. So I would say, and United States is probably around 60%. It's higher in kids. So I would say we're around 60%. But a colleague of mine and I did research looking at kind of snack food and said, right, here's the snack food that's being sold in Ireland right now. This was like 2 years ago, being sold in Ireland right now. How much would you have to eat? Would you have to eat what I would have to eat in order to absorb the production of this type of food? So do you want me to read it out and tell you what you would have to eat? So this is 2022, 52.6 billion in snack food, very particular type of snack food. So I'm not talking about takeaway food. I'm not talking about kind of breakfast cereals, just snacks like crisps, etc. So that's €520 per person per year you'd have to spend on this particular food. And that equates to 6 packets of Skittles, 3 Mars bars, 13 digestive biscuits and 7 packets of crisps a week, in order to keep the golden circle going of this production. Wow. And again, I'm not talking about, your stuff that you get at the deli counter, frozen food like frozen pizzas, etc. I'm not talking about takeaways. I'm talking about just crisps, chocolate, sweets, that kind of thing. So we're definitely high up there.
So if they're that bad for our health, does there need to be a public health initiative to move away from them, in your opinion?
Yes, and this is the thing. I think kind of even me, Kathryn, when I was younger, or certainly 10 years, 15 years ago, I'm now working in this area of university research for about 20 years. And I remember before I worked in Trinity, I worked in the University of Leicester, and I used to teach food marketing there. And do you know the documentary by Morgan Spurlock, Super Size Me, when that guy goes out in 2002 and he takes a McDonald's diet for a month and he kind of observes on himself the effects on his body. And the whole documentary starts off as 2 kids whose parents are bringing McDonald's to court because their children had contracted obesity. And this is how Morgan Spurlock starts off the documentary. And so I play this to a group of students in the university, and the guy, Morgan Spurlock, says, where does personal responsibility end and corporate responsibility begin? And I said, so that's what we're talking about today. And I freeze framed the 2 girls up on the big board or whatever, and I said, so what do you think about this? And I was a pretty poor lecturer, sure. I didn't give them any kind of context. I just showed them this, and total silence in the room. Maybe there's 150 students there, and God love one of the students, they point up at the 2 girls and say, see them, they deserve to die. And it was just a kind of typical gut reaction. And I was kind of a bit taken aback, and I was like, Jesus, what do I say now? And I said, but if those were 2 girls up there who had anorexia and were kind of going, their parents were going to fine or kind of sue, magazines, etc. for their anorexia, would that be different? Yes, but that's completely different, and it was completely different in everyone's head in the classroom. And they think to themselves, this is my fault. This is my own personal shame. And I think that all of us have this thing about it, like we default all the time. No, I have to take care of my kids. I have to take care of my body. And we all in Ireland overemphasize the kind of the things we have to do. And we bunker down and we turn off our kind of radar to what's going on around us in the environment. And we are not half angry enough about what's going on in the environment. Why am I walking into the local corner shop? Why am I walking into the supermarket? Why, when I take out the lunch boxes on a Friday and I see the type of food that is provided for in our public institutions, in our supermarkets, why, when I go upstairs to get my kid off the computer, do I see her watching ads for here's how to count using Skittles? Do you know, and why do I preserve my anger and my energy for my own family and shouting at them at the kitchen table rather than shouting at the system that has allowed it to be that way?
Well, if you were in government and could get legislation passed tomorrow, what are the first things that you would do to improve the health of the population?
Well, Kathryn, I suppose what you need is a bit of carrot and a bit of stick. And the carrot is, or the stick is firmly for me in my hand for the food industry. And the stick has to be a financial stick. There's no point in saying to people, oh, do you mind being a bit nicer to the public? Do you mind being kind of more transparent in your advertising? Do you mind not advertising to kids? Do you mind not lobbying government? Like, businesses won't do this. They respond to financial incentives or disincentives. And so everyone has been talking about the sugar sweetened drink tax, etc., and that makes things more expensive and great, and we consume less of them as a result, but it's still in the same space of consumption. My problem with my consumption. So we have to change that to have a conversation about subsidies. And subsidies are all of those ways in which you are taking money from your tax. You're taking money from your tax. I'm taking money from my pocket. And I am paying companies to advertise junk food to my children. And then I let them have a tax write-off for their advertising. So every junk food brand in Ireland has a write-off for their digital marketing, their public relations, etc. So I would end subsidies for these types of industries, and I would use those subsidies, those billions and billions of euro, to incentivise our farmers to grow differently, to incentivise our schools to prepare food differently. So really kind of not a conversation about how do we make our own food more expensive, but rather how do we take these billions of euro and put them in a different place.
And reinvest. All right, Norah Campbell, Associate Professor for Critical Marketing in Trinity College. Lovely chatting to you this morning.